Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Social Work Bubble podcast. I'm your host, Laura. I'm a licensed master social worker here in New York, and today we welcome a special guest, Brittany, who is joining us all the way from South Africa to dive into her experience as a child protection social worker in a South African nonprofit. So thank you so much, Brittany, for coming on today.
It's a pleasure.
Now, before we dive into today's episode, for those listening, don't forget to like, share, and follow the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, and we'll get started. So, Brittany, thank you so much for joining us. As we get started, can you introduce yourself to the listeners and kind of talk about your background and what you're currently doing?
Sure. So I'm Brittany and I currently live in South Africa, Cape Town. So I'm a child protection social worker. I obtained my honors degree at the University of the Western Cape. It's one of the big universities in Cape Town. And this is my second job. It's my second nonprofit organization that I'm working at.
Mm-hmm.
And my first year as a social worker in the field.
Exciting! Okay. How are you liking it so far?
It's stressful. There are a lot of social issues that we don't see in the lectures that you are faced with, and dividing professionalism and emotion can be very tough sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's very true, I think, for so much in social work is everything is very different in the classroom versus in real life experiences. It gets very complicated very quickly.
It does, especially if you are working so closely with children and your heart just goes out to so many of them, and you have to remind yourself, look, it's a job. You can't get too attached.
Yes. It's the hardest part. Okay. Good. Now, I mean, just in general, to start talking about social work, because obviously I'm based in New York in the United States, very different, I'm sure, than probably social work in Cape Town, South Africa. What's the reputation of social workers like in South Africa?
So when people in our communities, because we are communities that are faced with poverty a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So you get your houses that are sharing one wall, and you can hear what your neighbors are saying. So when they see our work vehicles, the first thing that they think of, whose children are you taking away today? So in South Africa, when you say, oh, I'm a social worker, it's like, oh, so you take kids away for a living.
Gotcha. That's interesting, because that's honestly pretty similar to how social workers are viewed in the United States. There's still a lot of
worldwide thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that taking away children and social work is probably a worldwide thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah. And it's hard to, I guess, get people to trust social workers when that's the kind of reputation that is there.
Definitely. We work with, my clients are a lot of adolescents that are now faced with drug problems because we work on what is called the Cape Flats. So there's a lot of drugs, and I have now seen children of the age of 8, 9 years old that are now doing all these different drugs on the market. So it's very tough with regards to that.
Absolutely. How do you deal with that in your job when you see that?
So it breaks my heart. It definitely does. You get those one or two that will creep into your heart because they are looking for a way out and they just can't. And funny enough, the ones that don't want an out are also the ones that creep into your heart. So, you as you go along, you pick up tips from colleagues and things, and I think that helped a lot for me to now divide my professionalism and my art. So I'm getting there.
Oh, that's good. It's a tough balance to strike. Oh, wow. Now,
Definitely.
what do you need to become a social worker in South Africa? Because even in the United States, requirements can differ based on what state you live in. So I'm wondering what that looks like for you guys over there.
So basically, you would have to have what is called a matric certificate. So that is your
Mm-hmm.
grade 12, your school leaving certificate. You get your either your degree or your honors. And
Okay.
once you become a social worker in South Africa, you have to have a driver's license. At
Oh.
any company that you work at, you have to be in possession of a driver's license.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I've seen that as a requirement for some positions, but it's not really something that is like nationally, like you have to have this. Especially, I mean, I've worked in New York City, so having a driver's license isn't really essential because there's so much public transportation. Mm, okay.
So on your side, would where you based, do you guys also do things like home visits and to your clients and
Oh
things like
yeah,
that?
yeah. It depends. I mean, again, it depends on like what your job is and what your role is. But I think for many social workers, there's definitely home visits involved, especially when we're talking about like child protection. There's obviously home visits there. What's interesting is, I mean, at least here, to be a child protection worker, you don't necessarily have to be a social worker. Um,
Oh, wow.
and so, which is not great. It comes with its flaws because, at least from the town that I'm from a pretty rural area, and that probably contributed to it. But you only needed to go to this like 6 month training, and then you were qualified to be a child protection worker, which, you know,
Yeah,
I think there's a benefit to having social workers with like an education and understanding of the complicated systems and issues that people deal with,
mm,
and maybe they have a different kind of skill level and approach to working with children and families. So, it comes with its flaws, but home visits are certainly something that many social workers do.
okay, because we are suffering with home.
It's tough. It is really tough. Do you ever, I mean, for your home visits, does it feel like there's ever safety issues where you would have to have police come with you, or is it mostly on your own?
So luckily for us, we normally travel to in a car.
Oh, great.
Um, so but there are times that you are in gang-ridden areas and
Hmm.
you just walking from one house to the next, you feel the eyes on you. You feel that look, anything can go south at the moment.
Hmm.
It's sometimes I feel like it's a movie, like like you're anticipating something may happen.
Hmm.
But I do commend the gangs. I do because they are very open to us as
Yeah.
social workers. So they would be like, hey guys, I don't think it's safe for you to come into the area today. Then we know, cool, let's not work in that area for the day.
Oh, wow.
So they're very open. They're
Yeah.
very
Just a
open
good
to
rapport
us.
that's there.
Definitely, without them, I don't know how we would have worked in certain areas. But
Hmm.
the respect level for your position in the community, the community has this respect, and I think that also plays a big part in us actually doing our job and being actually safe on home visits. So
Yeah.
it's not too bad.
Oh, that's so important too, because I think so when we lead with so much fear, that's going to affect those relationships. And I think part of
Mm,
changing families or communities is being able to connect with everyone. And so even though it can be like, oh yeah, like we're communicating with the local gang, like that's important though in creating change and in making people feel safe and respected.
so definitely, especially in South Africa, knowing that I come from an area where I walk to the shop and there's a gang.
Hmm.
It's normal for us. So actually being able to communicate with a gang member or a gang leader to do your job, it actually gave me a different outlook on the way that I am a social worker.
Hmm.
Because if I can go from communicating with the CEO at our company to the gang,
Yeah.
the it plays a big part in like the development that I have as a social worker.
Hmm. Absolutely. That's so interesting. I do like too how, I mean, it sounds like you're in pairs then. So you're also with another social worker when you're doing these
Yes.
different visits.
It's either a social worker or a social auxiliary worker.
Okay.
So those are like our support workers. They are kind of social workers, but they can't do everything that a social worker can do.
Right.
So having them also helps a lot,
Mm-hmm.
especially when we need to register children's birth. They are actually parents that are on my caseload that they are 25.
Mm-hmm.
Their parents never registered their birth, so they don't have a birth certificate, they don't have an identification document,
Mm.
and neither does their kids. So working with our home affairs department, they also play a very great part in assisting us there.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay. That's great. Because, I mean, so many social workers that I know that are doing home visits, they do it on their own. And so, like, you'll try to make your supervisor aware, like, this is where I am, this is how long I'll be gone. But it's still, I mean, it's scary and it can be really tough to
It
just
is
walk into situations only with like a pen and a piece of paper and hope for the best.
with your little hardcover book
Yeah.
and hoping nobody does anything.
Oh, wow. Okay. Have you had any like moments during home visits that have been particularly, I mean, good or particularly bad?
Yeah, so um, last week, for
Mm-hmm.
example, I was with my partner and we were on home visits, and our supervisor called us and she says, "Hey guys, I need you to stop whatever you're doing." And we're
Mm-hmm.
like, "Okay, cool, what's up?" And she's like, "You need to go and remove 7 children. They're not all siblings. Some of them are siblings, some of them are from different families,
Mm-hmm.
but they're all in the same foster home." And it took my partner and I 3 days working overtime, not sleeping, doing reports because we still had to go to court. So in 3 days, we had to remove, find placement, place them, and take them to court and make sure that everybody is safe.
Wow.
So that was like a really great experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was very high ups during that experience and very low lows. Because we've had temporary safety parents phone us on the last minute and say, "Oh no, we don't want to keep this child anymore."
Mm.
Then it's back to the same process, looking and going through the whole process again. But yeah, I don't think I've had any bad experiences so far.
That's great.
Um, I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. I mean, especially with the kind of work that you do, it's so important, but I mean, it's tough. It can definitely come with its difficulties. So it's nice that it's been a good experience so far.
But I'm just gonna put that out there that admin is the most difficult thing of the job. I've been sitting with admin for 2 whole days,
Mm-hmm.
and my supervisor just came in this morning and put 5 different piles of cases that added up to 72 different family cases, and she's like, "Hey, this is your new caseload."
Oh my. Okay. Is that manageable, like with the responsibilities that you have, or like what do you feel is a good cutoff for a caseload for you?
So this caseload looks very manageable.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't sound manageable to some, but it
No.
actually is,
Okay.
because most of it is non-statutory work, while others are statutory. So basically, with our statutory work, we take them to our court so
Mm-hmm.
that we can just finalize like foster placement or reunification with parents. And the monitoring is just us keeping a track of the children's behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Are they being neglected? We just keep on checking to make sure that everything is going according to the way it's supposed to go with where
Mm-hmm.
they are placed. So it's very manageable if the correct planning is done. I
Mm-hmm.
feel that's very, very important in social work. I'm
Mm-hmm.
only learning that now.
Yes, that's very true. Do you feel like you have a work-life balance at this point?
I've only learned to work-life balance, I would say, from this Monday,
Mm-hmm.
when at 4 o'clock I looked at my watch and I said, "Okay, guys, I'm going to the movies this evening, so I'm leaving work at 4."
Good.
Because because last week I was working till 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening, from about 7:45 in the morning. So it took time for me to realize that 4 o'clock is your cutoff. You don't work over that. You also have a family at home. You also have hobbies that you need to do. So
Yeah.
for our own mental health, we need to do that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's how we're able to do our job. And I mean, it's definitely that kind of thing that we say, like, practice what you preach. You know, if we have to tell clients, well, self-care is important, boundaries are important, but we can't do that for ourselves, how are they going to take us seriously?
And I fully agree with the boundaries. I only have one cell phone, so I give my clients my WhatsApp number and I say, look, I'm free to have a conversation during 7:45 in the morning and 4 o'clock. 4 o'clock, I do not answer any WhatsApp phone calls. There are your few clients that will try and push your boundaries. Yeah. But, once you set it straight and say, guys, look, no, as much as you have a family, so do I. And as much as you work a job and cut off at a certain time, so do I. So it takes a while until some of the clients actually realize that you're not somebody that's there 24/7 and you are just a social worker during this time. But it does get better. It does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think through that too, clients will learn how to deal with those things on their own, where they don't become so dependent on the social worker in their life to figure it out for them.
That is actually very true. I don't think that some social workers realize that we actually make our clients very dependable on us and that they can't make decisions for themselves then. So they will be stuck in this thing, oh, let me ask the social worker, let me ask my social worker. So I always explain to the clients that, look, we always learn it at campus, self-determination. You guys need to decide things on your own, If you decide that you want your child back, I'm not responsible for your child. When your child is in your care, the court decided and the court said, look, you can have your child back. It's not my thing. Whatever happens to your child thereafter, you're going to have to deal with the consequences. So it's very hard to be firm, especially when you're of a very young age and you have these adults that you have to talk to, and it's now like, oh, a child is talking back to me now. So that is I think the biggest challenge that I've faced coming into this, having older people look at me and say, how old are you? You look like you're 16. You should be at school. So getting them to respect me as a social worker takes some time. And explaining, especially to the dads, that I actually do know what I'm doing. So I'm not somebody that they just picked up from high school on the corner. And that was actually a big challenge in the beginning when parents meet me and they would be, so how old are you? And I would say, ma'am, I'm 23 turning 24, thank you. Oh, you don't look like you know what you're doing. And then I explain, it is new. I am a new social worker to the organization. I'm still learning processes and things like that. So it's going to take some time. Just as much as I'm a new social worker in your family, I'm a new social worker in this family. So hopefully they'll understand shortly.
It's tough. I remember too I'm still a pretty new social worker. I've only been in the field for like 3 years since I graduated now. But even at the beginning, because I practice as a therapist right now, when I would work with families, I noticed that like that would be something I would get is like, you look really young. Or I would work with, like, I'd have a client who was an older man, and he would constantly make comments about my age or thinking I don't know what I'm talking about. And I noticed within myself, I'd try to like dress a certain way to look older and to be taken seriously. And it's just tough. Like sometimes it does just come with time and experience where families learn, oh, I can trust you. You know what you're doing.
Yeah, I'm also trying to be dress older, just to, look a little older. It doesn't work on my side. It doesn't.
Oh my gosh. Now, can you kind of walk us through what does a typical day look like for you? Like, what does a typical work day look like?
Okay, so I'm very fortunate to say that I only live 5 minutes away from my office.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
so it's a quick, 5 minute drive down the road. Um, we at our organization have this thing that the first thing you do in the morning is have your coffee,
Mm-hmm.
and then I always start with my admin because I know that look, I have to submit a portfolio of evidence every Friday to my supervisor. So I plan normally on my portfolio what I need to do for the day, all the telephonic calls that I need to make to clients. I do in the space of 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Also, for those that are not in South Africa, load shedding is killing us.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to always plan around that. And then if it's a home visit day, I normally leave at 8:30 in the morning because I spend 100% of my day on the road. The next time I would see the office would be at about 4:30. So if I'm in office, it's just all my admin, my filing of my court orders, my filing of my process notes, all the process notes.
Yes, all of the notes.
So it's basically depending on if there are any emergencies,
Mm-hmm.
we would take care of maybe urgent removals that need to be done that was given to us, or if there are a few colleagues that are ill and can't make it to court, one of us would usually stand in for them. So it's basically like you have a different day every day,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the exciting part about being at that organization. Every
Absolutely.
day is different.
Yeah. Keeps it interesting.
Definitely, you're
Mm-hmm.
never bored.
Yes. Oh, good. Now, I mean, here in the work that you do you feel like there are any laws that kind of guide child protection work that you would want to change, like based on the experience that you have, where you've kind of seen, oh, this really isn't working, this isn't helpful?
Yes. So we work a lot with the Children's Act. Our Children's Act is kind of our Bible at work.
Mm-hmm.
We are governed by that because if there are anything that we want to do, it needs to correspond to what is mentioned in the Children's Act.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because we take it to court, so the magistrates at court are very particular that everything needs to be kind of reference to the Children's Act.
Mm-hmm.
There are a few sections of the Act that speaks to children being exposed to certain circumstances that can affect their emotional well-being or their social well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that that is not worked on enough. We are guided by it until a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Thereafter, it's kind of, what, you're on your own type of thing. You need to substantiate your reasoning in court so much for that to be taken into account. And a child's social well-being or mental well-being really affects the developmental
Mm-hmm.
stages over the rest of the years that they face. And I feel that that needs to be part of the Children's Act in South Africa way more than it is.
How do you think that would change things?
For the way that I look at it, it would change what I do a lot because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of my work is focused on physical circumstances. It's focused on there is a child that is being exposed to drugs or there is a child that's being neglected. There's never a case of there's a child that is emotionally abused.
Yeah.
It's always based on physical. So I think it might change how social workers in child protection work with the Children's Act
Mm-hmm.
and how it will be a little bit more work than we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that it would be very beneficial to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that is so much of, I mean, just like child abuse and neglect is the psychological and emotional piece of it. Where, sure, like
Yeah.
there are some parents where they're not physically abusing their kids, but their kids are still suffering in really awful ways.
And that is where our depression, our suicide, our running away all comes from. So I feel like that is actually quite a big part in society as a whole. And I'm not sure how it is in New York, but in Cape Town and the rest of South Africa, a lot of our kids suffer from depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and those are the needs that are not being met.
Right. Absolutely. Do you feel like there's still a lot of mental health stigma in South Africa?
Definitely. Definitely. Especially in the communities that I work in, we have a lot of our grandparents looking after our children, and our grandparents cannot understand why we keep on stressing to them. Mental health is important. There is this thing of you are mad or you are insane that goes around in the communities, in the specific communities that I do work in. So our grandparents are not educated enough on mental health due to the fact that it was taboo back in the day that they were raised. So it is a catch-22 basically, because you would like to educate them, but you kind of can't educate them because they still have that taboo feeling towards it.
Sure. It is very similar, where I think here the stigma has definitely shifted, where I think a lot more people talk about their mental health openly, especially when it comes to depression and anxiety. In some ways, it's almost shifted to the opposite, where people almost make too much light of it, and they're kind of like, oh, I'm super depressed, or like just making jokes about it. But then in older generations, there's still very much that stigma, where I've really only seen that shift with younger people that are talking about, oh yeah, I'm in therapy, I talked to my therapist today, or stuff like that. But there's still so much stigma, I think, outside of that, where once we get past depression and anxiety, when we talk about other serious like mental health disorders, people just don't understand it, or there's still a lot of like taboo around it.
No, definitely. And I think that it's the same year that our younger generation is now using the terms very loosely of we depressed, we want to be vibey, so we depressed, or we have a therapist. Like, what did your therapist say about it? So I think that it's going to take us as a country a while before we can actually, agree upon that mental health as a whole is very important, and it's not just depression and anxiety. There are actually other mental health illnesses that we don't talk about, that a lot of people actually do suffer from.
Absolutely. Is that, I mean, in your job in child protection, do you do a lot of education and like prevention work too, or do you feel like it's mostly reactionary?
So basically, I'm mostly reactionary. We do have a psychologist on our premises. So I am very open with my clients, and I tell them straight away, look, so ma'am, I feel that your child would benefit from having a couple of sessions with our psychologist. It's not to say that your child is mentally ill or suffering from something, but talking helps. And talking to a stranger helps even better. You don't feel that somebody is going to judge you. They don't know you. They've never met you. They're not going to read your file. So seeing the psychologist would open your child up to a different part of themselves that they've never known before, or that you haven't known before. So I feel that my clients do sometimes feel that maybe I'm trying to tell them something indirectly, but I do. I'm very honest, and I say, look, ma'am, sir, it's not the way you think it is. It's just me preventing something like that happening.
Certainly.
So with regards to the education part, we don't do a lot of education on it, but I do inform my clients that, look, this is something that is very important in our lives. We don't think of it. I always make the connotation that, look, when we don't feel well, we go to the doctor. So why, when we don't feel mentally healthy, why do we not go see somebody about that? And I will even tell my children as well, my kiddies, my law clients, I tell them all the time, look guys, when you have a sore throat or you have a stomach ache, we go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you're not feeling like yourself, we go to the psychologist or we go to a therapist or a counselor. It's just to keep ourselves healthy mentally and physically.
Absolutely. That's so important, just those little moments where we can really tackle some stigma right in the moment to show people, hey, there's another option here. Mm-hmm.
It's especially with when children go to school, they see that, oh, my friend has this or my friend has that. My parents can't afford it, so I'm not good enough. That's where our depression starts. And it hurts me to say that it starts at schools, but I do feel that it starts a lot at our schools.
Certainly. Do you do any work within the schools? Or like, do you collaborate with any people in schools at all?
So at the moment, no, but I do work closely with schools in certain areas. We gain, they called school functioning forms. So our school gives us, our teachers will actually fill them out for us and explain to us this is how the child is coping at school academically, the appearance and all of that. And that is how we can also gain more or less some insight to, is they neglect, is they abuse. So we use different avenues to come to a conclusion through our investigation.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. It's very similar to here then, where, you want to gather resources. You have to kind of get your proof in order from many different people. Okay. Interesting. Now, I wonder, because you had mentioned just like some kids in foster care earlier, do you have a lot of foster parents? Do you have a lot of people that are willing to take kids? Or is that also a struggle?
So that is a huge struggle for our organization right now. You find that there are some families that are willing to do it. We work on related placement and non-related placement. So if you're related, we would normally place you either with your grandparents if your mother or your father really cannot take care of you, and aunts and uncles. And then the non-related placements are the hardest to find because we do not have parents that are willing to take in strange children because of biological parents. A lot of our foster parents have been scared by our biological parents that come and hound them and want to see the child and make all silly demands. So it's very hard for us. We have to really beg and plead sometimes with some foster parents, please just keep this child for 2 months for me. In that 2 months, you are running around, you're trying to find grandparents, you're trying to find aunts, uncles, just anybody that is actually willing and able to take care of this child the way the child deserves.
Absolutely. Again, it's still very similar to here. I feel like it's pretty universal as finding foster families. It's really tough because there is that stigma that comes with it with having to take care of a troubled kid or a kid with all these problems and still working with their parents. I mean, it's a lot, but kids need it in order to thrive. And it is nice to see, though, that stuff like what we call kinship care, like the related placement, is something that's kind of like the first line of decisions, because that is helpful for kids to kind of try to stay within families if they're able to.
No, definitely, especially when it comes to your traditions, your religions, your your cultures. South Africa is very rich for their cultures and traditions. So keeping a child in a family that have similar or the same is what we try and look for, especially religion. So biological parents would ask us, can you please keep our child with either, if they are Christian, with a Christian family, or if they are Muslim, with a Muslim family. So we try and always keep our biological parents involved, because what we have seen is that the more involved our biological parents are, the more they want to better their lives, the more they want to become the parents again. So it's kind of a motivation for them to,
Yeah.
stop the drugs, stop the alcohol, and get help. So that's been quite amazing to see that change has actually come about and the reunification could happen.
Yeah. I love that too, because it's such a way for the parent to feel empowered and still respected. When it's so easy to just be like, oh, well, you messed up, we're not going to listen to what you say, where I feel like here, considering, oh, the parent wants their child to stay in a family with like these particular traditions or beliefs, that's just not really respected here. Like, I think it's starting to shift where people are like, okay, this is an important part of helping a child, but also because there's just so few foster families and families willing to like have kids with them. It's just really hard, but I mean, that's life changing, especially for the parent to be like, oh yeah, like I can still do this. I can be a part of it.
It is, and the fact that our foster parents actually, well, some of our foster parents actually allows our parents to come to the house and visit the children there and say, look, if you guys want to do something with them, do it here. If you guys want to have a barbecue, what we call a braai, have it here. They involve our parents so much, and I actually commend all my foster parents, and I say, you know what, thank you for what you're doing, not just for the children, but for the family as a whole. You are helping me make that family whole again. And a lot of them don't think they're doing much, but we always enforce the fact that you are mending a broken heart, or you're mending a piece that was broken in that child. Because of you, that child is not going to end up on the street somewhere or end up playing dead. Or so I always inform my parents that, look, you guys are doing great. You guys are the reason we can function as social workers. Because if we couldn't, we would have probably sat with 30 kids in our office daily and not know where to take them. So
absolutely,
I commend actually all foster parents for just opening up their homes and opening up their hearts and loving other people's children in the way that they love their own.
Absolutely. I mean, it's huge. It makes so much of a difference in making sure that child and that family could potentially be reunited, or at least if that's not able to happen, that child is still able to heal and have a fulfilling life.
Yes, fully agree.
Wonderful. Now, in talking to like other social workers, whether they're in child protection, anything, maybe they just work with people in child protection, what would be one piece of advice that you would give fellow social workers?
So my advice to any social worker would be is that yes, the money is great, but do it for the love of wanting to make people whole again. We always ask, we were always asked the question, why social work? There's so many other careers. Why social work? Because we had that passion in us, and it's important for us not to forget the passion. Once that passion dies, then you need to tell yourself, look, this is not for me anymore, and make space for another social worker. Because if we don't have that passion anymore, we're not going to be doing our jobs for the reason that we should be doing it.
Absolutely. That's very true. Because I think in this field too, we can just easily get burnt out and resentful and all of those things. And then we're not doing the work well either at that point. So to try to keep that passion is so important.
I fully agree. The passion is what makes us get up every morning, even though we hate getting up at like 6:30 in the morning. It's that passion that keeps us going, and I will always remain by the fact your passion fuels your work.
Absolutely. Well, Brittany, this has been so wonderful. It's been really interesting to kind of see what your work is like in child protection, but also just in Cape Town, because obviously, I mean, just different experiences. So to kind of compare. For our listeners that want to continue to follow your journey, is there any place, any kind of social media that they can follow you at?
Not yet. We're not allowed to really post a lot of our
That makes sense.
Yeah. So we're still working on trying to get something running there. Shortly, they should be.
Okay, exciting. Well, I'll keep listeners up to date on that. And for those listening, if anything resonated with you, please feel free to like, comment, and share. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Brittany, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.